Butlers and Headmasters, this is Internet Personality Vangelus, and the final Trans5mers Deluxe was in such question as to how readily he'd come out, I got one off eBay from Taiwan. Luckily, I didn't pay much extra, and double luckily, Cogman seems to be hitting at least some form of release here in Canada, at Electronics Boutique, down in the States, at some Toys R Us's, and over in Japan in December. And, well, I got one from Taiwan too, so he came out over there. What's Europe? Cogman is a Titan's Return crossover piece, and that part starts with the actual movie version of Cogman, Headmaster Cogman. I am pretty sure this guy is all new tooling and not reusing any other Titan Master torsos or limbs, but if I'm wrong, then don't worry, I already have been told in the comments. Sadly, his tiny form has a great sculpt on a sculpt-devouring color of gray plastic, with paint only on his arms due to their playing a part in the head mode. But, pip and cheerio, that head mode. It's all paint-washed up the face butt and totally adds an unmistakable Cogman factor to any body he decides to attach to. Just like in the movie when he, oh, they never filmed it. Oh. His own personal Trans5mers is a fully licensed Aston Martin, which looks sexy as F. For sure, its body uses unpainted gray plastic, but those silver rims. If you open the roof, you'll also see that it's a softly detailed interiored two-seater, outdoing the variety of single-seat space cars that populated a solid sector of Titan's Return. Both driver and passenger attach via a single Titan Master foot peg, which is oddly hard to push into place due to all the car around the seats. Anyway, this car mode has delightful curves. Like I said, the car body isn't coated in silver paint, but the roof is painted, the rims are painted, the taillights are painted, the headlights are clear plastic but in all the right places. This is wonderful stuff, portraying a lovely deluxe-sized toy car, regardless of your thoughts on the robot mode aesthetic. Spoiler alert, I spent months thinking this guy was a heavy retool of Age of Extinction modern Bumblebee, and while the transformation shares a few of the rough broad strokes ideas, it's much more its own thing. If anything, it's a 100% overhaul, cleanup, and improvement of that Bumblebee Stinger design. The top layer of the Aston Martin compresses into a darn decent backpack, and both the arms and legs do a satisfying amount of transformation that goes beyond the comfortable semi-shell former lifestyle that many Movieverse Deluxe cars fall into. The legs actually fold up their car panels, the forearms curl up their door panel outer plating, and darn it, you can even beef up Cogman's cog crotch and cog pecs with some hinged and bulkening. By the way, on my copy of the toy, the Titan Master head socket connection is tight and wonderful, not falling into the sad Jigglesville of your Scourges or Highbrows. Tall form Cogman looks kind of like the slimmer design from the movie, all dressed up in knight armor. The padded, slim aesthetic look is pleasant to my tastes, and while there's certainly a lot of car to be seen when viewed from the rear, I think it all folds up pretty well and avoids looking cluttered. The biggest protrusions all flow with the knight armor motif, and his torso detailing is positively clockwork. Like, literally positively. He seems to shop at the same fashion outlets as Vector Prime. And that gear-loaded sculpt received some decent paint washing for a mass retail Transformers toy. The shading even goes into the surprising amount of detail to be found beneath the pec plate, though the equally surprising amount of sculpted detail on the underside of the pec plate itself is unpainted. I'm sure somebody's mad. I think my only real issue is that due to the Headmaster thing, Cogman loses out on having a cool slopey neck design. Also, his shoulder things might get in the way here and there, but you can totally flare them out if you want to get all Yamaguchi. Being a knightly sort, Cogman includes a sword that's apparently based on Cade's medallion. Straightforward with a painted blade, it does the job and goes into his hand, and bumps down the folded forearm car panel a bit. What would be a bummer turns into a blessing, as that also allows his wrist transformation joint to let me do the pointy thing with the swordy thing. Oh, and since the whole Headmastery thing is 100% Titan Master compatible, you can indeed pop any old Titan Master onto Cogman's beautiful body, which may well be a literal crime. Get a second Cogman if you must besmirch his glorious form with Frankensteining head jobs, you cur! With his Titan Master connection, Cogman's got a ball socket connected neck, and you can get tiny amounts of tilt out of it because his head does slope downwards in its design, so there's a bit of collision, but I'm happy with the amount of bobble I'm able to achieve. His shoulder pads can wiggle, and that's fun. Actually, it is kind of fun. It's like super dynamic at times if you get them popping out like anime stuff. Otherwise, there's a ball socket connection on his shoulder with an opening and another hinge down here from transformation to let his arms come out this far on the ball joint, and then this far with the extra transformation hinge. There's a bicep swivel and an elbow hinge at 90 degrees. If you got the sword in here, you've already popped that sleeve bit down, which means you can use the transformation joint to point the sword, and that makes me pleased. I wish that this thing would lock there, but whatever. There's no waist joint because from his anus to the back of the top of his spine is his backpack connection stuff, and that's unfortunate, but I'll live. He's got ball socket connected hips with this much splitability, so he's not super flexible. He's just British flexible. He can kick pretty high, and his thighs swivel, and his knees are weird because it's like a click to get there, and then like a much softer click to get there. So there's a lot of interplay in here. You can pause between the soft detent here a whole lot, but from here to straight, it's like a super hard click. Oddly, this has not messed with my posing desires super a whole lot much, to be that said, but be aware of it. His ankles can also kick forward and backwards a little bit, and because it's a transformation joint, but because this is all like cut through the bottom of his leg, it comes off rather natural when you're kicking it forward like that for the kind of walking, stepping posture. You can't kick it farther down, though, so you can't have him like step forward and plant his foot in the ground. But regardless, this dude is surprisingly emotive, and I think a lot of that has to do with A, his design, and B, the amount of clearance his joints get, so you can have like crisscross leg stuff like this. This dude's fun to pose. As I said earlier, I spent a shameful amount of time thinking Cogman was a heavily modified Age of Extinction modern Bumblebee, and I am so glad that he absolutely is not. While that toy was one of my favorite entries in the Trans5mers line, Cogman easily kicks him down a staircase alongside many other challengers to take a spot as one of my favorite entries in the Trans5mers line. With an excellent car mode, wonderfully knight-like robot mode, well-integrated headmaster gimmickry, and the delightful tandem of heavy surface detailing with ink-washed paint shading, Cogman actually makes me feel okay about the Premier Edition price point. Not to mention the fact that he's friggin' Cogman. The idea that this toy might have been as rare as Dark of the Moon end-of-liners like Deluxe Leadfoot or Deluxe Q is just chilling. I'm so glad Cogman has managed to have a legitimate release. Certainly not shelf-warmingly plentiful at the time of this recording, but if you do want one, you can probably get one without cartwheeling through hoops. By the way, unless you despise his aesthetics, or Aston Martin's, this is a figure well worth pursuing. Like, quietly, he might also be one of the best Titans Return Deluxes. Anyway, this has been Internet Personality Vangelus, and of all the Trans5mers I have had the pleasure to review, Cogman is by far the coolest.